Thank you for that presentation and those thought-provoking numbers. Certainly does make one feel small and inadequate and needy. Let's rise to our feet. We'll open with a word of prayer. Eternal Father, we see the size and the scope of just the world that we live in, and to think of you knowing and understanding and creating everything that is in it. And then we think about the galaxies and the universes and the vastness of and the complexities of the laws of nature, of science, of all of the things that you made, and we stand in awe of you. And we are greatly humbled that you, as an eternal God, are interested in our lives, have chosen us as individuals, and have a plan for us as individuals. Thank you for that interest, Lord. Thank you for touching our lives. Thank you for paying the price for each and every soul. Lord, we pray that as we continue to look into your word, that you would bless our time together. We pray for anointing, for inspiration, for your Spirit to guide and to lead us, to lay your burdens upon our hearts. Help us to see the world and others as you see them. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. For the beginning or first part of the message here this morning, there's not a lot of Bible. It will come. There's quite a bit that'll come later on, but just to forewarn you that at the start here, there will not be a lot of Scripture, which I lean heavily on Scripture, but just to lay some groundwork and some foundation, it just worked out that way. So the Webster's 1828 dictionary defines betrayal or betrayed as being delivered up in breach of trust, violated by unfaithfulness, exposed by breach of confidence, disclosed contrary to expectations or intentions. So if you are betrayed by someone, that basically means the trust between you and them has been broken. Genesis chapter 37 is the account of Joseph and his brothers, where they betrayed him and sold him to Midianite traders that went and sold him to Egypt, where he was sold as a slave. As a result of Joseph being betrayed, this would bring him through a number of years of great difficulty and struggle and hardship that would eventually lead to him becoming the prime minister of the superpower of the world. His brothers, however, the ones that did betray him, what was their lot in life? They spent the next several years living in fear, in guilt, in lies, in deception, until their actions were disposed some 20 years after they betrayed him. And even after that, if you consider how they felt when their father died, this thing never left them. The fruits and the repercussions of their betrayal never left them. In the year 480 BC, Ephialtes the Trachis, a Greek renegade who lived in Sparta, betrayed his homeland and his people. King Xerxes I was trying to invade and take over Greece, and he came with a massive army. The size of his army and the scope of his army is not fully known. Some people say 800,000, some people say up to 2.5 million, but that could very well just be imagination. But by any means, he came with a massive army to invade Greece. His father, to my understanding, had tried doing this earlier and failed, and he was motivated to finish this job. And so he came with this absolute overkill of an army to do this. So As he was coming into Greece, there's this place that he had to come through, this passage at the side of the mountain where there was mountain on one side and lake on the other. And they came to this narrow passage that is said to be only wide enough that an oxen cart could travel there. So he had to get this whole army and funnel them through this very narrow passage to get into the place where he wanted to invade the country. King Leonidas of Sparta, he took his stand there because he knew that the army would have to go through there. So he took the bravest men from the Greek coalition forces, and including the renowned 300 Spartans, and they made their stand there as what is known as the Battle of Thermopylae. They were severely outnumbered, and they knew that, and that's why they chose that specific strategic place to make their stand. And they did so rather successfully for about 3 days. They held off this massive army with a relatively small number of people. There might have been like 700 of them, including the 300 Spartans, that held off these hundreds of thousands of soldiers. But then this Ephialtes shows the Persians a hidden pathway in the mountains that only shepherds and local people knew about. His efforts and his betrayal of his country allowed the Persian army to overrun the Greek defensive formation. The Persians were then able to come in behind and outflank the Greeks, and eventually would win the battle and the war. And they won the Battle of Thermopylae. Ephialtes had hoped that he would be rewarded by the Persian king Xerxes, but no such reward was bestowed upon him. Instead, he was forced into hiding because the Greeks and the Spartans put a price on his head for that betrayal, and he would later be killed for his actions. Fast forward a few more years to 44 BC. Rome is now the superpower of the world. Julius Caesar is the head of the Roman Empire. He is a masterful general. His war strategy, his ability to inspire, to motivate, and to mobilize his legions make his forces and his legions literally unstoppable. He wins crusade after crusade. He wins battle after battle. They expand. He's continuously expanding the Roman Empire. Now, while Julius Caesar is out fighting these wars, and he is this renowned general, he is conquering lands, there's a Senate in place in Rome, back in his home city, that looks after governing, making the laws, collecting the taxes, and doing things that governments do, and also largely funding the crusades and the wars that he is continuously going on. One of the people serving in this body of the Senate is Brutus. Now, early in Brutus's political career, Brutus opposed Pompey, who was also a leading general. That at one time there were 3 men that were leaders at the head of Rome, and Pompey was one of them, and so was Julius. But Pompey was responsible for Brutus's father's death, and so Brutus did not like Pompey. Brutus was close to Caesar. However, Caesar's attempt to evade accountability in the law courts put him at greater odds with the senators, and so Brutus was torn. Brutus eventually came to oppose Caesar and sided with Pompey. There was a civil war in Rome where Julius, his popularity was rising. He won favor with the people, and Pompey wanted to quench that and to quell that. And so there was a civil war, and Brutus sided with Pompey. Now, during that civil war, Brutus was sided with Pompey. Julius Caesar ended out winning that war in 48 BC, after which Brutus surrendered to Caesar, and Caesar granted him amnesty. He forgave him completely. He extended forgiveness, and not only forgiveness, but friendship, close friendship, and deep trust. In the year 44 BC, Caesar takes the title as Dictator Perpetuo, which means he's not a king, but they gave him this title that he is a dictator perpetually, or for an undetermined amount of time. he had this power to be dictator over the people of Rome. On March 15th, 44 BC, Brutus, a staunch friend of Caesar at this point in time, betrays his leader when he joins a group of conspirators plotting to kill Caesar. Although the others kill Caesar out of jealousy, Brutus believes he is killing Caesar to protect the greater good of Rome. He convinced himself that he is doing this, and I think that it was true that he was doing it because he wanted to protect Rome from a dictator or a king or somebody who would be a tyrant. Brutus is famous for playing one of the key roles in the assassination plot against Julius Caesar. Although he was Caesar's staunch friend, Brutus ends up delivering the final blow that kills Caesar. Caesar was stabbed 23 times in his own Senate by the senators that had conspired against him. The final stab came from his friend Brutus. It is said that he fought, and this would make sense because of the general and the war man that he was. It is said that he fought and resisted the attack as they were coming upon him one after the other, until he came to Brutus and his friend. He saw his friend, his ally, pull a knife, and he gave up fighting. He gave up fighting. The betrayal was too much. When he saw his friend Brutus pulling that knife and stabbing him, he gave up the fight. He falls dead at the feet of the statue of Pompey, the general that he had defeated just a year earlier. And there he lays dead. 2 years later, Brutus and many of the conspirators went into hiding and had to flee because they underestimated Julius Caesar's popularity with the people. There was an uprising, there was another civil war, and many of them had to flee and go into hiding. And Brutus ends out committing suicide 2 years later. Betraying his friend, committing suicide 2 years later. Judas Iscariot. Out of a multitude of followers and many, many that followed him, Jesus chose 12 men, 12 close disciples. One of those men was Judas Iscariot. Judas was the one that carried the money bag. Judas, as we can remember that was shared here some months ago about being covered in the dust of Jesus, Judas was covered with the dust of Jesus. He was among Jesus' inner circle, and he had close access to the Son of God. Yet for 30 pieces of silver, he agreed to betray him. He agreed to betray him to jealous religious leaders of the day that were seeking to destroy him. Early in April of the year 33 AD, Judas brought a multitude with him to a place where Jesus often resorted, away from the crowd, a place that his disciples knew. And with a kiss, Judas identifies Jesus and betrays the Son of God to those who would seek to kill him. Now, in our day and age, we might not understand the context or the importance of that, but there's no social media, there's no pictures, and it is said that Jesus looked so ordinary that among his 12 disciples who were also ordinary Jews, the average person would not have been able to pick him out. He was just an average, ordinary person. And so the betrayal of that kiss was essential for Judas to identify to those who wanted to kill him, to identify and say, "This is your man." A kiss, a symbol of love and intimacy, he uses as a sign of betrayal. This sets off a series of events that leads to Jesus being crucified. Judas finds himself with no friend. He finds himself only with a tormented conscience, a tormented heart, and a tormented mind. He finds a tree and he hangs himself. Betrayed. A breach of trust. Broken trust. Now, while these examples that we speak of, these examples of betrayal, these examples of broken trust, some of them are so infamous that the name, Judas's name, for example, has become synonymous with traitor and with betrayal. That's how much he betrayed. So we see where the betrayal takes people. We see where that these infamous betrayals in history, what the end is of the people who committed them. We see where Judas ended up. We see where Brutus ended up. Those who break the trust of their friends and their comrades. These men were trusted, and they broke that trust. There was confidence placed in them, and they broke and betrayed that trust, and all of them suffered terrible consequences for their actions. And we could get discouraged looking at these accounts. Even in our own life, many of us have been hurt. We've been let down, not to the point where of these other betrayals, but in some small way we've been disappointed, or someone has broken our trust. Does this mean that now we don't trust anymore? No, of course not. We must trust. Now, I do not want to look at betraying this morning. I want to look at this idea of trust, which is the opposite of betrayal. You may be deceived if you trust too much, but you will live in torment if you do not trust enough. He who does not trust will also not be trusted. If we do not trust others, how can we expect others to trust us? A person who is suspicious, who is into conspiracy theories and suspects everyone and everything, that person is often hard to find trustworthy, because he's so suspicious. You begin to wonder about him. Where's he at? I wonder, is he this way too? There's an African saying that says, be careful when a naked man offers you a shirt. How can he offer you something that he himself does not have? You have to have it to give it. And if you are a kind of person that doesn't trust, or that is always suspicious, then how can someone give you trust or entrust you with that? You can't be trusted if you don't trust anyone. But without realizing, our daily lives are full of trusting things in one extent or another. We drive over bridges and overpasses almost on the daily without giving a thought that they could collapse or that they might fall apart. We get into airplanes and we trust that they will fly and that they'll land and bring us safely down to land again. We drive on roads and we trust the people that are coming against us that they're not going to hit us. You could easily, anybody could, but we trust that they don't. We trust that the roads, especially if you're driving in new areas or an unknown road, and it's dark, and you trust that there's not a cliff at the end of that road, and if there would be, there'd be a sign there. You just generally trust that. We buy a coffee, we drink it. We don't think that there might be poison in there. We just trust that it's safe to drink. So our lives are filled, to one extent or another, with us trusting in certain things. The definition of trust is confidence, a reliance or resting of the mind on the integrity, veracity, justice, friendship, or other sound principle of another person. It is a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. So as we've already established, that every day many of us trust in many different ways, in many different things. We are trusting right now that the trusses on the roof here are going to keep this roof from collapsing and coming down on us. We trusted this morning that our vehicles were going to get us to church. So without giving thought, we trust. What helps us to so easily and so readily trust in these things? Do you suppose this morning that the first person, or maybe even the first 100 people, or perhaps even the first 1,000 people that got into an airplane and took flight, that they did so without giving it a second thought, that they completely trusted it and never thought about what the consequences would be? They were most likely filled with extreme anxiety, and they possibly set their affairs in order before they got into that plane, because they thought there was a good possibility that they might not come down again. But the more people do it, the more apparent it becomes that it's safe to do so, and that it works. And once millions and millions of people have done it and do it on a daily basis, we have no problem getting into a plane without giving it a second thought. As a matter of fact, it is said that it is safer to, you have a better chance of getting killed in that car accident on your way to the airport than you do flying in a plane. But that's most likely not how the first people felt that took those first and early flights. Warren Buffett said this, trust is like the air we breathe. When it's present, nobody really notices, but when it's absent, everybody notices. If the trust is absent, then it becomes suffocating. It's like there's no air in the room. But these are things, and this is just stuff, right, that we trust. And there's the laws of nature, there's the laws of aerodynamics, the law of gravity, there's science, there's all of these things. We just know that engineers know that you do certain things, you'll get certain outcomes. So these things are easy to trust. Aerodynamics, they say that if the plane there's so much thrust in the air, I don't know, James could maybe explain all of that, how the rudders go down and stuff changes and turns and air pushes the plane up, whatever. That's just the laws of nature and aerodynamics. It flies, it works, and it always will. But what about people? What about people? People are a different thing. They're a different thing altogether. With people, we don't just automatically trust. Trust needs to be built. Trust needs to be established. It needs to grow. It needs to be nurtured and developed. When we meet a new person, we start at a certain level of trust with that person, depending on who that person is, what his reputation is, what we may or may not have heard about them, and if we are by nature a trusting person or a suspicious person. It will also depend if the person is a criminal, if he's the prime minister, if he's a pastor, or if he's a car salesman. That will all depend on how much trust we put into that individual. All of this information combined with our biases, our discernment or our lack thereof, and the vibes that we get from them will determine how much or if any trust we will have with that person. That will at least be the premise or where we start off, and then you can continue to grow and develop that trust, or it can get diminished depending on where the relationship goes. Now, the interesting thing with trust is that one can foster a relationship for decades, and that trust can be broken in a matter of minutes. Trust is one of those elusive things that takes so long and so much effort to build, and it can so very easily be lost. It's like humility in that sense. As soon as you think you have it, it slips through your fingers and it's gone. So who can we trust? How much can we trust? Is it wise to blindly trust? How much trust is too much? I'm not sure how to answer these questions, and I think that it would be different for every individual that you meet and what the situation, the circumstances are with that individual. I'm not here to answer those questions for all of us this morning. But I did read this statement about a week and a half ago on Streams in the Desert daily devotional on August the 1st. I read this statement and it struck me and it challenged me. It caused me to, it never left me since I've read it. And that's where this message was born from. And the statement went like this. The statement reads, "O Lord, thou knowest that we can trust the man that died for us." O Lord, thou knowest that we can trust the man that died for us. Who can we trust and how much? Can we blindly trust? Yes. We can blindly trust the man who died for you. Why? Why can we blindly trust? Why can we put our complete hope and confidence and trust in him? Because he loves you. He selflessly gave himself for you. Because he cares for you. Because he made and understands you. Because he has made He has the most wonderful plan for your life because He is worthy. Because there is no cause greater, there is no one that is more worthy of our love and of our life and of our devotion. Why else? Because there's over 6,000 years of history, 6,000 years of His story of faithfulness and trustworthiness. Because we have a great cloud of witnesses, as Hebrews said, that can testify of His complete trustworthiness and faithfulness. Greater love than this hath no man, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Jesus laid down His life for us so we can trust Him. Now, I want to make clear this morning that trust is not understanding. They are two different things. We do not always understand God. God's ways are far above our ways. We just heard this morning about the immenseness of the capacity of God and what He is able to do and comprehend. And our small human minds, we can't come near to the scope of that understanding and comprehension. And so we cannot understand God. We cannot, but we must. We must trust Him. Speaking of trust, Hebrews 11 speaks of some heroes of the faith that trusted Him. I'm going to cut in verse 32, but before this, it starts almost in verse 1. It speaks of the earlier ones, Noah, of Abraham, of Enoch, and it goes down through the list of men who trusted God. And then it comes to Hebrews 11, verse 32. It says, "And what shall I say more? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, of Samson, of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of aliens, women received their dead raised to life." Wow! Amazing deliverance, amazing victories and triumphs and miracles happened to these people that trusted God, who put their faith and their confidence in Him. And God showed up and delivered. But let's keep reading. Let's keep reading, because I stopped in the middle of verse 35. Verse 35 goes on to say this, "And others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover of bonds and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth." That doesn't seem so victorious anymore. That doesn't seem so triumphant and so like they were overcomers. But what does it say? "All these have obtained a good report through faith and received, but they received not the promise of God, having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect." It goes on to say that even the ones that were not delivered, verse 39 makes no distinction between the first and the latter. It says, "But they all, having obtained a good report through faith." We do not need to understand if God chooses to deliver or if God chooses to let you go through the fire. If God chooses to open up the sea before you or if He has you swim through it. We don't need to understand that. We simply trust God. And their report was the same. They all, having obtained a good report through faith. We do not need to understand why some receive deliverance and victories. We trust God all the same. I'm reminded of what Job said in Job 13:15. "Though He slay me, yet will I trust in Him." God can do whatever He sees fit to do with me. It doesn't matter. I do not need to understand it. I will trust him. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Job didn't just say this. He meant it. This is in Job 15. He was in the midst of living this, which makes it all the more powerful. Though he takes my children, though he takes my home, though he takes my business, though he takes my health, though he takes my wealth, I will trust him. Job did not understand what was going on. He had no clue what was happening to him, and if or when it was going to end. Though nothing makes sense to me, and I do not understand what is happening and why it is happening, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Another account is in Daniel chapter 3. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but it is a wonderful and beautiful account to read. But we'll cut into verse 16. This is after they have refused to bow down, and they come before King Nebuchadnezzar. The furnace is lit. Daniel 3:16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Now take note that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not promised that God would deliver them from the fiery furnace. They had no idea what the outcome of this trial was going to be. They just knew that there was a sentence: whoever does not bow is going to get thrown to the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar was giving them another opportunity here. He was giving them another chance. And this was their answer. This is who they put their trust and their confidence in. They trusted God. They did not know what God was going to do. They did not understand God's ways, but they trusted him. The furnace was there. The fire was real. It was hot. They trusted God, and it did not matter what the outcome. And they said, God is able to deliver us. But if not, if God in his all-knowing wisdom chooses not to deliver us, we will still not bow down to your idol. That is trust. That is trust. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods. Another account is Elijah. And in this account, we will see that trusting God does not always mean that we get an immediate answer to our prayers. And also, we see that having some great experience with God does not keep us from future struggles and from future trials and testings. In 1 Kings chapter 18, 1 Kings 18 will break in at verse 36. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that thou art a God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and that thou hast turned their hearts, that thou hast turned their heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the dust and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and they said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. And Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they took them. And Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. And Elijah said unto Ahab, get thee up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of abundance of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. And Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, and he sat himself down upon the earth, and he put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, Go up now and look towards the sea. And he went up and looked and said, There is nothing. And he said, Go again 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time that he said, Behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea, like a man's hand. And he said, Go up and say to Ahab, Prepare thy chariot and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. And it came to pass in the meantime, while the heaven was black with clouds and the wind, that there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was upon Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. On Mount Carmel, Elijah standing alone as the lone prophet of God against 400 prophets of Baal. The great display of God's power and might. The altar, if you read the story earlier, was triple soaked. He had them soak it 3 times, dig a trench around, fill that with water. He made it as impossible as he possibly could. And then the fire of God falls down, consumes the altar, the wood, the stones, the sacrifice, licks up the water and everything. That is amazing. After this tremendous display of God's power, Elijah should be filled with hope and with confidence for the next 2 to 3 years. He has God's ear. He prayed, and it's not a long prayer that he prayed there, and the fire of God falls. He prays and God moves. Yet later on that day, he's at the side of the mountain with his head between his knees. And he cries out to God and he prays for rain. And he sends his servant over to see, is there a cloud coming? Is it coming? We do not understand why the cloud was not there at the first time he sent the servant. But Elijah didn't stop praying when the cloud wasn't there the first time. He didn't stop the 5th time nor the 6th. He prayed and prayed and prayed. And at the 7th time, after Elijah kept praying and kept trusting God, he saw a cloud the size of a man's hand. That was all the answer Elijah needed. He told his servant, Go tell Ahab to get ready. Are you praying to God for a rain in your life? Have you been praying for something for the last week or month or maybe even a year, and you've gone up over that mountain to look for that sign, for that answer to God's prayer? I want to encourage you this morning, keep on praying. Maybe you're at the 5th time, maybe you're at the 50th time. Elijah didn't stop praying until God answered his prayer. He didn't stop trusting God. He did not understand why God didn't do it the first time, but he kept on praying until God answered. Don't stop. Keep praying, keep seeking, keep knocking. God will answer in his time. So again, 2 answers to prayer. 2 answers to prayer. He sends fire down, consumes the altar, and then 2nd time he has to persevere and pray longer, pray more. But God answers, and he sends an abundance of rain. The next chapter, the next verse, if there would be no chapter break. 1 Kings 19, verse 1. Ahab goes home like a little boy and he tells on of all the things that Elijah has done, all the trouble that Elijah has caused. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and withal how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die, and said, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. Even after Mount Carmel. It seems just days after that experience, Elijah got so discouraged that he asked God to take his life. You see, those big experiences, Yesterday's blessings don't suffice for today. Walking with God, trusting in God, is a daily trusting, a daily walking. It is something that we need to do daily. If we are on Mount Carmel, or if we're under the juniper tree, or if we're somewhere in between, God wants us to trust Him. God wants us to have faith in Him. God has a plan. Elijah didn't see God's plan. God does not want us to understand everything He does. He wants us simply to trust Him. We may not understand why or what or when, but we can trust Him and we can rest in that. We can know that His word is sure. We can know that His promises are real. And we can know that He will do what He said He will do. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not on thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. Don't lean on your own understanding. Our understanding is so limited and so small. It is so narrow. And God's understanding is so vast and beyond our measure and our comprehension. His ways are past finding out. Don't judge your situation by how you feel or by how it looks. Trust God. Trust His grace and His mercy and His power. There's a line in the song, God works in a mysterious way, His wonders to perform. It says, behind a frowning providence, He hides a smiling face. You see, God sometimes allows hard and difficult things into our life so that He can purify us, so that He can refine us, so that He can make His work more complete and more perfect in us. And we don't see what He's trying to accomplish. We just see this difficult thing that is right in front of us here right now. And sometimes we fight that thing and we push it away instead of allowing it to do its work. Instead of allowing God to have His way so that He can do this, so that He can bring us here. I want to look at an account in 1 Samuel 1. 1 Samuel 1, starting in verse 1. Now there was a certain man of Ramathaim-Zophim of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, and Ephratite. And he had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts at Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife, and to all her sons and daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb, and her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. So it seems like there was a fight with the 2 wives. There's this Peninnah that was constantly provoking and being a stick in the mud and a thorn in the flesh to Hannah, that she did not have any children, and Peninnah had multiple sons and daughters. Therefore she wept sore and did not eat. Then said Elkanah her husband unto her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am I not better to thee than 10 sons? So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk. Now Eli, the priest, sat upon the seat by the post of the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul. And she prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thy handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now it came to pass, And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought that she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked him. And she said, Let thy handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. And they rose up early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord, and returned and came to the house in Ramah. Interesting to note here, she started eating and her countenance changed after Eli had told her God had granted her petition. Much like when Elijah saw the cloud the size of the man's hand, that was enough. He knew rain was coming. Here, she gets this word from the high priest. The Lord has heard thy petition. That was enough. She started to eat. Her countenance was changed. They were still there. She was still barren. But she trusted God. She believed God was going to answer her prayer. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come about, after Hannah had conceived, that she bare a son, and she called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of the Lord. What a blessing. What a beautiful answer to prayer. What a picture of God's power and of his love and of his care for even every individual. Hannah was one single person on the whole earth. God cared for her, God heard her prayer, and God answered her prayer. But let's go back to the beginning of that story. What brought about that weeping and that praying and that anguish of her soul? The anguish and the provoking sore came from within. It came from within her own home. It didn't come from far. It wasn't from somebody that was 400 miles away that was shooting arrows at her. No, it was somebody that was close, somebody that was dear to, that lived in the same home. It came from Peninnah. Without Peninnah, the adversity, there is no weeping before God. Without the weeping, there is no anguish. And without that, there is no Samuel. So you see that God used Peninnah in Hannah's life to bring about a Samuel. Now, was it enjoyable for Hannah here at the beginning of this story to be provoked, to be made fun of? And Peninnah should not have done that. It was wrong. That was unkind and mean of her. But God was working something in that. God was working and using that adversity to bring something beautiful in Hannah's life. I'm sure it was very unpleasant and it was hard. The pressure, the provocation from someone that should have loved her, someone that should have been sympathetic to her, somebody that could have loved and cared. What if Peninnah would have said to Hannah and had pity on her? And she had multiple sons and daughters and would have given one of her children out of love and care, given one of them to Hannah and said, you can raise this child for you. They were living in the same house. I'm not sure. It could have worked. Maybe it could have. What if she would have done that? Would Hannah have been at that place then where she is seeking God in that anguish of soul and spirit? And where God then answers her prayer and gives her Samuel, and I believe she had a number of other children after that as well. That all would possibly not have happened. God uses this adversity. And sometimes there might be a Peninnah in our lives. Sometimes we might have a stick in the mud in our lives that God is using to work out His perfect will and His perfect plan. If you have a Peninnah in your life, let her do her work. Don't run from it. Trust God. He has a perfect and a wonderful plan, and He will work all things together for those who love Him. Psalm 118, it is better to trust in the Lord than to put your confidence in man. Proverbs 29, he that putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe. Corrie ten Boom said, never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. So this morning, it does not matter where you are at in your life. We are all in different seasons, in different times, in different situations, in different circumstances in our lives. We're at different places. We're on different roads. Our lives have different needs. We have different burdens, and we have different struggles. Some of us may be in a fiery furnace with flames of temptation and sore trials, with the lures of the world burning all around us. Some of us might be on Mount Carmel. God is moving. God has answered prayer, and we are blessed. Some of us may be under the juniper tree, and we're about done. We're about spent. We are discouraged. We are tired. We are spent, and we are done. Some of us may be living daily with a Peninnah in our lives, getting provoked and aggravated and frustrated. Some of us may have just given birth to a Samuel. Some of us may be praying to God about something and have been praying, and we've gone over that mountain for about 15, 20, 30 times already, and we're still praying. I don't know where everyone is at here this morning. I don't know what everyone is going through this morning. I'm not sure, but I do know this. You can trust the man who died for you. You can trust the man who died for you. And you can trust his word. You can trust his promises. You can trust his ways. You can trust his methods. You can trust everything about him. No matter where you are, you do not need to understand what God is working in your heart and life, and I don't either. But we need to trust him. And we can trust the man who died for us. He is faithful. He is trustworthy. We have a Father in heaven that sees the end from the start. He doeth all things well. Don't be anxious. Don't fear. Don't struggle. Don't worry. Just trust God. Don't seek to understand. We are not asked to understand God. Only trust him. I will end with what Job said. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. God bless.